I am an analyst and project manager here at Suku with a goal of really using blockchain technology to implement in various use cases to help support supply chains, whether that be transparency, whether that be document management, or some other potential use case. I've been with Suku for about 2 years, and as mentioned previously, I was working at Deloitte Consulting in the Deloitte Blockchain Lab based out of New York, where I was focused on working with supply chain blockchain projects. So I'm really looking forward to sharing my experience over the last several years focused on blockchain implementations of supply chain solutions. And I think the main question we're all here to figure out is how are companies, particularly in this era, particularly in the era of COVID and coronavirus, digitizing their supply chain to help manage risks and disruptions that could potentially occur. And we've seen occur ubiquitously throughout supply chains for B2B and B2C institutions. So what I did is I basically took a personal lens on this and focus from a Suku perspective. How does Suku and what are our clients and our partners doing to digitize the supply chain and manage risks and disruptions? So I'm hoping throughout the next hour, hour and a half, I can give some insight into what we're doing, what our clients are doing, what's working, what's not, what different solutions and offerings are out there. And just want to encourage everybody to ask any questions at any point in time. Stop me whenever. Would love to have some disruptions in this presentation and make it as interactive as possible. It looks like we have a fairly small and intimate group, so feel free to stop and we can make this as conversational as needed. So looking at this question, how does Suku digitize the supply chain to manage risks and disruptions? I think it all comes down, at least for our organization, to transparency, and namely transparency through giving power back to consumers. Transparency as an enabler to give power back to the consumer to ensure that they're getting what they need. Because what we discovered throughout this process of several software iterations is that businesses who put the customer and the transparency and choice of that customer first have a natural consequence of making their supply chains very robust, very risk tolerant, and very capable of managing the disruptions that can come up throughout a supply chain. So I guess what I'm saying is the same efforts that are being utilized to protect the consumers have a natural baked in property of being able to help the businesses themselves, even from a B2B perspective. So that's really where we're focused. And just to give a little background on how we got to this conclusion and where we came from, is when we started exploring the conscious consumer demographic and looking at these consumers who really care more, share more, and spend more than the average consumer. And they're naturally a target market for an organization such as ourselves to start exploring, because they're the type of consumer who really care about whether things are transparent, whether there's a gap in the supply chain, whether there's an issue with their particular product or service. So focusing on them and satisfying this particular consumer base enabled us to build software solutions that make the supply chain for these consumers very robust and very transparent. So really what the challenge for a lot of these businesses was being able to connect with these conscious consumers. As I said, we felt like this was an underserved market in terms of execution, because these conscious consumers oftentimes wanted to be involved more, whether that was being able to give back to the brands that they were buying from and representing, or being able to just learn more and have more of a connection with the product and understanding where the raw materials and raw components were being sourced from. So really the challenge is two-sided. First of all, the companies are really struggling to understand how they're going to connect with these conscious consumers. A lot of the large corporations or even small and mid-sized enterprises don't yet know how to address the needs of this growing consumer base, and as a result, make their supply chains more robust and more tolerant to different disruptions, and really provide the customers what they want. And then at the same time, the customers had no visibility into being able to find the transparent or verified products that they're really seeking and have those credentials and have that next level of security and certainty that the products that they're buying are truly sourced and manufactured and developed and provided in the way that's being advertised to them. So throughout this discovery process, we've designed a software suite with several different solutions that can help digitize and manage supply chains to really focus on giving the transparency and capabilities to an end consumer that somebody might be demanding. The three that I'm going to highlight throughout this presentation are, first of all, tag management. We partner with SmartTrack, which is an Avery Dennison company, one of the largest global RFID and IoT manufacturers out there, to provide physical tags on products to help manage and quickly correct any supply chain issues and be more predictive on any supply chain issues that are foreseen. The second is a scanner and field application. This is more of a B2C facing concept, where essentially the end consumer can download an application, scan a QR code on a package, and see every touch point that product has had throughout its life cycle in its supply chain. And then the third is just a more general B2B platform and marketplace to help manage any sort of document authentication needs, traceability of assets, buying and selling of secured and supplied goods. And all of this is really supported by this more foundational blockchain infrastructure layer. So if that sounds good, I'll go ahead and jump into the scanner and field app. The scanner and field app, oh, sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, just maybe you're talking about that right now, but how much are you going into detail? I mean, if you're going to a company and want to have fully transparency of the whole chain, sometimes it's not really possible to get it because you have a supplier and a sub-supplier and a sub-supplier. So
Absolutely.
How far is your transparency going?
Absolutely.
I mean, the customer expect everything to be completely transparent, but in reality, it's so difficult to get it.
Exactly. And frankly, some of these more complex products, the end retailer or brand has no clue where a lot of this comes from, where, you know, there's upwards of hundreds of different raw materials or components or pieces or suppliers or vendors that go all into making this supply chain function to have this one end product, something that you could imagine is as complex as a car or something like that. So where we've started, and it's an excellent question, because a lot of organizations who are doing this are still trying to find the sweet spot of what's enough information to provide that consumer comfort, but not so much information where we're not getting an ROI on our effort, or we're not turning our wheels trying to dig up these different vendors and these different suppliers. So yeah, I'll definitely address that as I go through these product details. But it is a balance between giving the consumer the transparency they expect and demand, while still being reasonable and understanding that a lot of the supply chains in our modern era, as transparent as a lot of these large organizations are promoting them to be, are still extremely opaque, and people have no clue where they're getting their stuff from. So yeah, there's definitely a sweet spot where we can still provide the value, but not expense too much effort and time to collect information for particular products. And some of that falls on our product selection, like which products can we choose that have relatively simple and shallow supply chains, but still provide a ton of value to some of these consumers in terms of knowing what's in their in their products. And these are particular things like textiles and food products, where the supply chains might not be too deep because there's not a lot of components that go into these various products, but consumers are very concerned with what they're wearing and what they're eating. But excellent question. So jumping into the first component of this kind of two-phase component, and maybe let me step back. There's a B2C component, which is this scanner where they can scan the product and understand, okay, what is this product? What are all the touch points that this product has had? What information can I start to understand about these touch points? And what certifications or what we call claims are being made about this product? Is it in this case, we're looking at food. Is it grass-fed? Is it, what's the carbon footprint on this product? What sort of certifications for cleanliness and sanitization are these organizations abiding by? Being able to aggregate all that information from the various touch points and put it at the tip of a consumer so that when they're making a purchasing decision, they can quickly scan this product and have at their fingertips all this information to really make an educated and smarter decision than they might have just with a simple label or a sticker. On the back side of this, and what supports this kind of rather simple user experience for the end consumer, is a bit more complex B2b ecosystem, which is based on our proprietary blockchain infrastructure, which we've been designing, architecting, and developing over the last 2 years, is really how we capture, validate, and maintain all the data that gets distributed to the end consumer when they're scanning the product. So an oversimplification of how this works is essentially the consumer scans the barcode on the product, which a lot of effort has gone in by each supply chain participant to ensure the end consumer has all the information that they need. The information is aggregated. We know particularly, in some cases, we go down to the actual product level. Some cases we go to just the batch or the lot level, where knowing exactly where, this particular instance of this product and all the information behind it came from isn't as important. We just need to generally know what the batch or the lot of this product looks like and the touch points for this batch or lot of the product. And we aggregate all that information, and the consumer receives a verified product journey, which I'll go to in a little more detail in just a moment. But this is kind of the groundwork and the back end that makes all this function and allows us to verify every claim being made, verify every certificate that's being used to support any sort of attribute for a particular product, and so on and so forth. And what this really allows us to do is have a breadth of different benefits, both for the brand, the product seller, whoever's on the supply chain, whoever that may be, and the potential product buyer. On the seller side, they have an access to an ecosystem where they can, see who's being honest and who's transacting in a transparent and honest behavior, and gives them more visibility into their supply chain so they can be a little bit more robust and have some tolerance against potential risk and disruptions, which really is what this is all about. And they can offer insights into their products, which can possibly lead into a larger market share or revenue, which we've seen results from with our brands and our retailers who have been using and implementing a solution like this. On the buyer side, they get to see all the product visibility, they get to see all the details, they get to see all that information through the lens of verification and through the lens of knowing every piece of this information has been validated. They can more easily connect with the products that they're interested in buying. They can reference every touch point. They can see who the farmer was who might have raised the cattle used to create the steak that they're purchasing. They can see if it's some other product, the raw material provider, so on and so forth, which really gives them, one, peace of mind that who they're buying from is being treated in an adequate way, and two, a deeper sense of experience and connection with the end product that we're buying. As we notice, a lot of consumers, in this era feel very distant from the products that they're purchasing, and being able to support them in any means possible to be able to experience something closer to that product is something we're seeing a lot of ROI on. And then the final point here is making purchasing decisions based on these reviews and the data that they wouldn't previously have access to on these products. We once again, I'll get into some case studies about this particular implementation in just a moment, but being able to see and have all this information to make a smarter buying decision is what we're finding out to be very important to these consumers. So the premier partner that we've deployed the solution with is one of the largest retailers in Latin America, called Cencosud. We primarily worked with their Wong stores. And first of all, Cencosud is quite a large and established company. They have 1,100 stores, 130,000 employees all over Latin America, and they do about 14 billion in annual revenue per annual revenue. So we worked with their Wong establishments, which is more or less their version of Whole Foods, or a higher end catered towards your conscious consumer type of store. And basically what we did is we went live in mid-October in some Peru stores, looking primarily at 20 different meat products. And we saw great success where I can't get into exact numbers, but we saw year over year large increases in the sales of these products. We saw increases in the foot traffic of the stores. We saw increases of people shopping and scanning for these particular products. So really seeing some results, and just a few photos. As I mentioned, how it works is we basically put a QR code, which you can see from maybe this image or here on each package. So it's actually baked into the packaging of the product and put on the label. So when a consumer comes up and they're shopping, they can quickly download the application, scan the product, and then make a smarter purchasing decision. So I'm going to hop over to a quick demonstration of this product. Let me jump in. So as I mentioned, there's two components. There's the scanner application, which the consumers are using, and then there's the field application, which the various touch points in the supply chain are using. And I'm just going to go through a very high level, simplistic run through of how this would work from a backend perspective and how we get these QR codes as an output. So basically, we've set up 4 touch points for the meat supply chain. The first is the producer, the second is the processor, the third is transportation, and the fourth is distributor. The 5th point would be the actual retailer where these products are given and where the QR code is provided. So in the field application, our first touch point is the producer, Ricardo, and we have it both in English and Spanish to support our users in Latin America. And we'll log in as Ricardo real quickly. And basically what they're presented with is this backend field application where they can manage all their various lots. They can see what tasks they have. They can see what the status and progress is for any particular lot. They can add different certificates for claims they want to make about a particular lot, anything like that. So let's say I have my next lot or next herd of cattle that I'd like to put some provenance information on and share information about this particular product. What I can do is start a new lot. I created lot 19 earlier today, so I will create lot 20 now. Basically, we provide information down to the animal level, and this is the user interface. Of course, there are ways to automate this process, but a lot of these different participants don't have the infrastructure to integrate into any blockchain solution automatically, which leads to some manual implementation, as you're seeing here. You can put in the age of the animal, the weight, the breed, and you can save, add more animals, leave a message. As I mentioned, provide certificates. One of the certificates in the front, as I showed, is outdated, but we'll ignore that for now. But yeah, basically providing detailed information about how you're treating the animals, any certification you need to abide by government standards, or if you're just interested in making a claim about your product that your consumer base really likes and you want to back up that claim with a certification, you can also provide that information where maybe it's not mandatory by government standards, but it is something that your consumers appreciate. So you submit that lot, and basically this starts the supply chain process of being able to track this lot. It all starts from the farm in this case, and in different product suites starts with different supply chain participants. And maybe I back up for a second here. This is just one example and one implementation of a very linear and simplistic supply chain that we can use this technology for. What we've built is a dynamic way to build these supply chains and build all the touch points needed so that you can capture the sufficient information for your particular product throughout the supply chain. So this is just to reiterate a single implementation of how this software can be used. So we've started the lot with the producer. Then we need to go to the processor here, which is Maria. We'll go log in as Maria, and we'll notice she does not have the ability to start a new lot because she is a processor. But what she can see is a list of her various lots that she's associated with, and any status and any tasks that she needs to do. And if you notice here, this one is incomplete and it's currently at her processing facility. So what she can do is jump into this particular lot. She can see where it's at on the supply chain. She can select what cut of meat is going to come from this, how many units, enter any sort of message like we had an error, so on and so forth. Submit that and claim it as processed. Once again, being able to put any certificates about treatment of animals, any certificates about the particular behaviors or processes that the processor had to follow. The third is transport. So Sasha is our transporter. They log in. Once they've picked up the product, they notice that lot 20 is also incomplete. They'll click here, see that on the supply chain, that England Logistics is their current stop. They confirm that they've received all the units of the product with this particular SKU. They can add any certification, about how they're handling the shipments, any signatures needed. Once again, they submit this. And then it's up for this final touch point, the distributor, David, who hands it off to the end retailer. So David comes in and basically opens up the lot, as do the other supply chain touch points, confirms that all units were received, can add any additional certificates or messages needed, and certifies and submits. And once again, this is a very manual process, as particularly in some of these less established institutions and organizations or smaller businesses don't have the technical infrastructure to automatically onboard and integrate all their information. But we do possess the capabilities to support that if that's something that they need, and if they're at a point in their business where they can provide that information in an automated fashion. So we've completed that. Now we notice that lot 20 is completed. There will be QR codes created that look very similar to this, that essentially hold all the information for this particular product. And what I can do is I can get out the Suku scanner application. I can scan this product, this QR code, and I can see exactly what information is shown. And I don't know if you're able to see my current webcam right now, but demonstrating the screens you see here on this particular slide. to capture all that information. So the end user can see exactly what this product is, all the details about it, the journey of the product, and then zoom in on any particular touch point for this product. And sorry, I heard somebody, I think.
Yeah, just a short question.
Yep.
How do we have any experience how many people are really using the QR code and what kind of people it is? So for example, what is my understanding from a QR code? Sometimes it's just good to have it there, and people will not use it, but they think they have the possibility to use it and it would be right. So and they don't go into detail to follow every information up. So do you have any ideas how many people are using this searching for information with this QR code?
Yeah, I can't get into specific numbers, but you're definitely along the right track where the increase in sales from going through this initiative and having this information accessible wasn't necessarily proportional to how many people were scanning the product and reviewing the detailed information. So it does just having that label and having the ability to access the information oftentimes is the level of comfort a consumer needs to be able to feel confident in their purchasing decision. But we did see an uptick in users who did want to actually explore the detailed information of this product. But yeah, exactly to your assumption, some consumers, it's sufficient to just see a label and know it's from a trusted brand and kind of give them faith that they're doing the right thing.
I'm wondering a little bit that you are introducing this right now in US. So I've seen this years ago in Asia. So in Asia, it was very much a necessity because people don't trust the cold chain. So, and when they scan the QR code, they can see that there is really from producing the product to the retail shop, there is a cold chain working smoothly. So,
Right.
and this has a much more bigger meaning for people because just to know, it's good to have this information, you know?
Yep. Agreed. It's definitely the regions play a lot into it where you have these low trust countries such as China, at least trust in the supply chain, and in the US we have a bit more trust in ours, so there's not as strong of a demand for it. But yeah, absolutely. Within those countries that do have the established trust, we've noticed there's certain clientele who do demand that next level of verification. And for countries like the US, those are our primary target audience.
And a quick question on the information that goes into. So
Yep.
in my experience, I have worked with several of the food providers, and one of the things that they were concerned about is the food safety during the logistics part, right? So for example, you just want to make sure that your refrigerator or your ship does not go above or below certain temperature. Is there a way to integrate some of that IoT, some of those sensors into that blockchain so you can not only track it from the consumer perspective, but from the supply chain prospects as well?
That is a perfect segue into our tag management solution. Yeah, so essentially our tag management solution goes above and beyond just a QR code and manual or automated data entry. We actually, as I mentioned earlier, partner with SmartTrack to provide IoT, RFID, and NFC solutions so that we can get to the next level of detail for whether it's a temperature sensor and having constant stream of data and understanding that everything's checking out as we hope it would be, or it's just inventory management and understanding where all your goods are, or even putting a RFID tag or a NFC chip on the end product for a consumer to scan and have a little more engaging of an experience than they would possibly have with just a QR code and a label. But yeah, to your point exactly, this solution is more focused towards businesses who want to have that next level of security and that next level of authentication and information management in their supply chains that they wouldn't currently have without it. So there's a few different feature sets, and I'll jump into the platform itself in just a moment. I'll actually get on the web application, but just want to run over the features that are provided here. Basically, the core of this product is for the end consumer to utilize, or sorry, for businesses to provide to the end consumer to utilize to reference information about their products, similar to what we're doing with the QR code. So what we allow here is customizable tag redirects where any sort of information or any sort of experience can be provided within this NFC tag and redirect the user so that they can have customizable actions per tag or per product, or really showing what matters to the end consumer. Along with this, we provide a way to create dynamic consumer experiences with just a few clicks. We have an automated template engine. You get full control over what the end consumer can see. There's a way to manage products, tags, and associate any sort of content. Past that, and I think this is a little bit more what the question was pointed towards, is having product usage and just general data analytics for the life cycles of these tags and the products that these tags represent. Sometimes this might come in a B2C fashion where I want to see how often and where and what interactions the end consumer is having when they're interfacing with my product and scanning that tag and being able to track all that. Or sometimes I want to be able to have product insights in the sense that I want to measure the temperature for my shipment every 30 seconds and have that reported so that I can confirm that the cold chain is up to speed and it's being maintained in a sufficient way and in a way that keeps everybody's health top of mind. So this product usage insights and the data analytics behind that can really interface with however the business needs it to operate, whether that's on the B2B supply chain side or the B2C consumer experience side. Similar to what I shared with the QR code, we were able to provide an increased trust in branding, verifiable claims, and transparency for the end consumer through this. Basically being able to simply scan the tag and see that next level of detail and have confidence. And then from an authentication side, we can also provide tamper-proof tags and fraud protection for products that have a history of being manipulated, tampered, counterfeit, duplicated, whatever the problem is. Being able to put these tags on, particularly SmartTrack provides 424 tags that help protect the products. In the sense that the tags can't be simply scanned and duplicated. The tag is constantly generating different identification codes which match up to a third-party server. So those codes can be copied a single time, but you can't copy the logic that is used to generate those codes, so that the end user can be sure that this product is accurately represented by this tag and it is not a counterfeit. Even if the product gets counterfeited, the tag cannot be counterfeit. So I'll just jump into that platform really quick. Let me hop on here. But yeah, so this, as mentioned, this product can be used for B2B needs or B2C needs. It's basically a catch-all for any sort of RFID or NFC tag management that needs to be utilized throughout the supply chain or for the end consumer. So from a dashboard perspective, you can quickly see some of the most important information to the product owners or brands, retailers, distributors, whoever. For instance, being able to see the total number of blockchain proofs that have been used to secure information, being able to see how many tags are in circulation, being able to see how many scans of these tags are occurring, how many API requests are being made from these tags. And then here on the left-hand side, we have a broad range of options. I don't think we'll have time to go through every single one of them, but basically gives you that next level of detail on any particular feature of the tag or the tag management that you would like to double click on. So for instance, in tag analytics, what I was mentioning earlier, you can see the total number of scans the tags have had. You can see the unique devices being used to tag. You can see where these scans are coming from. You can see the output of these scans. You can see a map per particular tags if you're interested in, you know, how the supply chain is moving forward and tagging along. Then you can also look at tag management, which is, okay, if I need to zoom in on a particular tag and know when it's been used or where it's directing people or what information it's capturing, if it's still functioning, if there's a blockchain proof for particular information on that tag, that can be managed here. You can also look at from a scan perspective, so not necessarily the tag themselves, but you can look at how the scans are being managed. And then you can also look at being able to create new tags in either a single tag upload fashion or a batch upload fashion. Campaign management is for the B2C side of things. If you want to provide a particular user experience for the end user, when they're scanning your tag, you can provide that. And then this final part is just managing all the blockchain proofs that go into tag management and being able to see how the data that's established for these tags is really referenced and maintained on the blockchain to give that additional layer of security for these products. One additional use case that I think would be fun to mention during this is we were actually able to recently adapt this solution to help fight some of the issues going on with COVID-19. So what we noticed after talking to a lot of the take-home test kit manufacturers and distributors is that somebody could buy a test, they could take it home, they could take the test, and then they could interpret their results, but didn't really know what to do after this, whether it was interpreting the results for a positive test or a negative test or an unsure test. So what we were able to do with this solution is basically put a tag onto each box that represents that particular test. When they take the test, they scan the tag and they're able to report their results, any symptoms, any information, snap a picture for confirmation, and then based on what they're reporting, they're able to provide, or we're able to provide them any sort of guidance that they might need for handling whether their symptoms are positive or negative, whether they've had recent exposure to someone, how many people they're living to, whether they have a particular set of symptoms and are unsure, and aggregate and provide this information in an anonymized fashion to different governments and institutions, hoping to manage and stop and prevent the spread of COVID-19. And on the back end of that, what that looks like is real-time data and detailed analysis and insights for different COVID-19 patients using these particular tests with these NFC tags attached, which I thought was a really interesting use case implementation. And then of course, for the immunity tests, instead of the contagion tests, so somebody who might have an antibody for this particular virus, we could issue different immunity certificates to ensure that they've been established as a safe individual.
Can I just ask your question about this immunity certificates?
Sure.
To the whole group? What is your take on that? Because it's just discussed in Germany, and there were a lot of critical people. People had a critical opinion on that this certificate. So because it could be misused. so you need a special authority to issue the certificate, and you must see that there is no misuse. What is going on in your country with this certificate? I'm really interested in this. Maybe this is a question for later on.
Yeah, I would love to open the discussion to everyone. For our particular usage of the certificate, it's basically when a user takes a verified test and is able to that has been issued to them and is able to scan and verify the results of this test, we can basically issue them some sort of immunity certificate. But I do agree, for this to work on a global and trusted perspective, you almost need some sort of government intervention and government body, which we're definitely open to working with to provide this information that we're aggregating anyways. But yeah, to make it really function and really have that validity, maybe some additional screening is required.
So it's just an idea, or you're already offering this?
No, we're partnering with distributors right now.
Okay,
of
and
these
you
tags, yeah.
find the right companies to have the right test kit, because it's really critical.
Yes, with these certified antibody test kits, correct.
So I think in general, from my perspective, right, it's more of that you have this technology that can be trusted, but then the question is that how are you going to use it, right? So it's either can be, you know, paper pass if society, or if let's say a company, a meat producer, somebody else is looking for the verifiable solution. It's not really about, it's this technology just provides a way, in my understanding, and Garrett could correct me if I'm wrong here, it just provides a trust into that technology that is not tempered, that it's accurate, that represents exactly what it says. So it's pretty much, it's not a question of technology, it's a question of whether society or company wants to use that particular approach to fighting COVID-19 and monitoring their workforce.
Couldn't have said it better. Yeah, so our like this implementation would be, imagine, you know, a large organization with an office with 1,000 employees, and they would like to be able to bring everybody back into the office. They might use something like this to screen everybody, issue these certificates, and then bring everybody back in a safe and secure manner. And exactly to your point, that's up to how organizations and society wants to use these different certificates for immunity issuance, and what their standard is to feel safe and secure in that environment. So we have had discussions with organizations who wants to use something like this, and maybe there's organizations out there who have a higher bar and a higher standard where they want something issued by the FDA or you know, a federal or global health organization.
So a quick question on the kind of how we can take some of those technologies and how can we think about from the strategy perspective on onboarding those technologies. Can you share maybe from your Deloitte experience and working here, is that how do companies can actually think and identify things that can be automated, that can be verified through this blockchain or similar technologies using this RFID? How do you actually start this transformation towards this more verifiable, more transparent supply chain?
I think the biggest, let me see if I can find a great slide for it, but essentially the largest part for using any one of these tools that an organization can identify is, where does there exist trust that makes that organization or a partnership between that organization uncomfortable? Where is there, so trust is one, and where is there a lack of transparency that's hindering the business or the organization in some capacity, are the two main questions. Because when you can identify a circumstance where there's multiple parties coordinating, and there does not exist trust between those parties, or there does not exist means to hold organizations accountable between those various parties, particularly throughout the supply chain, I think blockchain becomes an incredibly good fit for being able to implement in those use cases. If we look at, you know, all these solutions that we offer, they all boil down to implementation due to lacking trust and transparency. As we saw with the scanner and the field application, we have these brands who can't be as transparent as they would like, or even as they're claiming in reports and finding out to be false. And we have these end consumers who don't trust the brands. And when we have that discrepancy between not being able to provide the transparency you'd like to provide and not being able to trust because of that lack of transparency, that's just a prime opportunity to implement some sort of blockchain infrastructure to really bridge that gap between what's going on, what's being said from a digital perspective and what's being tracked from a digital perspective, and what's being actually done in the physical world. And obviously those two worlds, the digital and physical, will always have some sort of discrepancy, and will always have some sort of distance and delta between what's going on. But what we can do with implementations like this is really learn how we can make that distance as small as possible, whether it's using something like the field application to capture data, or whether it's using tag management to track the cold chain and ensure the temperature is always kept at a certain interval of touch points. So for identification purposes, I would certainly say think to where there's a lack of trust or transparency, whether that's B2B or B2C, and we can start to identify where blockchain is most applicable. Unfortunately, a lot of we went through this large blockchain hype cycle in around 2017, and essentially blockchain was trying to be used for every use case imaginable, and a lot of them just didn't make sense. So luckily I was able to experience that wave and see what worked and what didn't, and for which reasons, and based off that, it always circles back to trust and transparency.
I just have a general question. So I understand quite good what are the use cases for, and that you can build something around that. But what is my key question is, if you really have, if you look in the future, everybody is working on the same use cases and is inventing an own a blockchain infrastructure. At the end, you have a lot of different competing blockchain infrastructures. Is there no need to bring it together or to form a consortium and to have some more bigger blockchains which are better to use on a global scale? I mean, do I understand it wrong?
No, you've got an excellent understanding, and it's a really interesting occurrence because we saw something akin to it happen in the internet versus intranet, where we had and a lot of organizations still do have their permission intranets where they manage all their technical interactions and all their digital interactions through a firewalled or a VPN area, which they call an intranet. And then we have this global, unpermissioned, public, accessible internet that really kind of, quote unquote, won out, you could say, because of standards bodies, because people were able to coordinate at mass, because people were able to collaborate and consort at large scale to really make these things functional and workable. And we're seeing something very, very similar happen in the blockchain space, where people are treating blockchain as a closed system technology, exactly what you're saying, trying to execute on the same use cases for their particular product or their particular slice of the supply chain. And as we found out from history with the internet, that might not be the best approach. So there are standard bodies out there particularly with Ethereum and Hyperledger, working together to create some sort of interoperability between blockchain architectures. So I think we'll see something very similar to what we saw with the internet, where we have these larger public blockchains that have particular use cases to manage certain information. And then we'll have these siloed, smaller permission blockchains that are also utilized for particular use cases that might be a bit more business specific. That's not to say the implementation of some of those use cases aren't counter to some of the ethos that blockchain really has, because blockchain's supposed to be this transparent, trustless, open, permissionless system. But what we're finding out is sometimes that trust only needs to be amongst 5 parties and doesn't need the whole world to validate. Sometimes that trust is just between a few smaller parties and doesn't need this permissionless infrastructure to really function. So I think you're spot on with your assessment, and I think we'll see some of these different use cases work out in a permission fashion and other use cases work out in a public fashion.
So a question on some of this asset management, right? So let's say we have, manufacturing, and we have, let's say we ordering steel from somewhere in the world, and we're trying to track whether it's on time, what is happening, what is going on, where it is on the ship, where it is in the logistics chain. So what about the connectivity that you require? So as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong here, the idea here is that you do some kind of the action, and that action is recorded in a distributed ledger. And therefore, you need pretty much a connection to the internet. You need a connection, you need almost an edge computing when you're trying to validate some of those use cases. So how do you address that? Like, how do you do all of this on the ship, let's say in the middle of Atlantic?
So just so I understand your use case, so we're looking at like a steel logistics provider, and we want to be able to validate that their actions are accurate without the need for internet access. Is that the case?
So my question rather is that there is a lot of steps that could be built into the supply chain.
Yep.
And not necessarily some of those steps will have a stable internet connection, at least in my thinking, right? To actually go and validate each step that I want to be validated within that system. So the question is, what are the requirements for the connection? What are the requirements for geographic proximity, maybe, to make sure that we can record that particular action?
Gotcha. So luckily, I think what you're getting at is, what if we need to manage supply chains asynchronously, where we have certain products coming and going, certain transactions occurring and happening in not necessarily a linear or synchronous fashion where everybody's on the same page at all points in time. Luckily, with any particular product, for the next manipulation to happen to that product or material, we will be there's some sort of handoff, there's some sort of transition, there's some sort of passing along of the product. So at that point in time, one of those two parties needs to be able to establish exactly what happened and what information is associated with the occurrence of that product transition. And that can be something as simple as a logistics provider A passing it to logistics provider B, or that can be something a bit more complex where it's manufacturers turning this particular raw material into 100 different widgets or 100 different SKUs. I think due to the nature of how supply chains function, not having connectivity all the time does not create large issues, because for that next touch point to happen, there's typically a chance in time that that information for that particular transaction can be recorded. I think what is important to point out is how that transaction is recorded and the rules and standards needed to ensure that that transaction is legitimate. So what's going on in this scanner and field application, for instance, is at every point in the supply chain, when a transaction occurs, what the end user sees is a pretty standard and vanilla interface where they feel like they're just implementing information. But what we've done the groundwork of on the back end, and what the end user doesn't really see, is we've predetermined the rules of this supply chain and this network, so that when somebody does submit a transaction, we know in both an automated and manual fashion whether this transaction is legitimate. Does it break business rules? Let's say manufacturer X has capacity for 1,000 widgets and they report a shipment of 50,000 widgets without any justification for that week. Well, we know there's something wrong here. They're breaking the business rules. They're breaking the requirements in some capacity. And that's when we can start to flag transactions and see, okay, what's going on behind the scenes, that we can't accept that into the blockchain as an immutable transaction because it broke some sort of business rule.
Perfect. Thank you. And then, I saw in one of your tabs on one of your panels that there was Ethereum balance on it. Do you need it for some kind of the payments, or you need it for processing the blockchain transaction? What's the reason for that?
Gotcha. Yeah. So we our infrastructure utilizes two different blockchains. The first is a permissioned instance of Quorum, and the second is a public instance of Ethereum. And the reason we utilize both is because different businesses and different organizations have varying degrees of what their requirements are for validating transactions. And based on what requirements that these organizations have, we can determine where a transaction needs to go. So let's say doing transactions extremely quick, privately, and in a really low cost manner is the most important thing for my organization. I'm not worried. They're not mission critical information. I need to secure them with a few people, but I don't need a lot of security backing the authenticity of these transactions. I could store all that information on permission Quorum, because permission Quorum doesn't have a global network that needs to be supporting these particular transactions. Any transaction on permission instance of Quorum does not require Ethereum, so it's costless. And then any instance on permission Quorum is also way quicker than Ethereum, because it doesn't, once again, need several block confirmations for somebody to look at that transaction as a valid transaction. If, on the other hand, I'm storing mission critical data, not in the sense of confidentiality, but in the sense of security, that I need this data to be validated and confirmed by as broadly and by as many people as possible. And I'm not too worried about how long it takes, because I only store information this important once in a while. And the requirements are much more aligned with what the Ethereum network would support. In that case, I can use public Ethereum to hash or store my information. And in that case, it does cost ETH to execute the gas transactions, because it's a public blockchain, and because it's an instance where you have random nodes supporting and validating your transaction. They need to be incentivized in some capacity to accept your transaction into their block. So our architecture basically accounts for various use cases, and even off-chain data storage if they have bulk data that they need to store. But in this particular example, we just have an ETH balance with a wallet in case some of the information is what's stored on public Ethereum.
I'm wondering why you are not going a step further. Right now, you have a perfect app to identify the product and the chain behind that. But if I'm looking for a customer point of view, I would be really interested also to have a payment function in it. I mean, this is the future of payment, and it's not so much implemented right now. So do you think to implement payment functions, for example, if you're working together with a big retailer to offer this technology?
You mean a payment in terms of?
Is this a product for the end customer? As an end customer, I go in a shop, I scan the QR code, I get all the information.
Gotcha.
But what is about adding a payment function?
Yes, so I guess
not with Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, but also with US dollars, credit cards, or what else?
Yeah, so I guess I skipped over this part a bit, but on the Suku scanner, we do have a wallet functionality where it can support cryptocurrency. But I do think a future iteration of this product is being able to support native and non-cryptocurrency payments. Absolutely.
And then a question on the distributed ledger, right? So we said that you pretty much have a public ledger and you have a private ledger.
Yes.
So I have two questions to that. So the first one is that when you are doing this private ledger, so to speak, is it your company that does all of the block building, or is it somebody else? And then the second question is there a way to kind of separate the same product into two categories, meaning that, for example, I can have one part exposed to the consumer and the other part is exposed to my particular business case? So pretty much to combine B2C and B2B in the one spot.
Yeah, both great questions. The first centered around who's managing the blockchain infrastructure. We give our clients and businesses the option to run a node and validate the transactions themselves and play a role in the permission quorum network. Obviously, public Ethereum is way beyond what we could possibly control, even if we wanted to, just because there's so many global resources being poured into it. But for permission quorum, we give the end client or the brand or any of the supply chain participants you might have seen in that workflow, anybody contributing data that needs to be validated, we give them the capabilities to run their own node and to support the transactions that they're establishing and to check their counterparties and their other supply chain participants' transactions equally. What we've found out is a lot of companies, particularly smaller companies without much of an IT department, don't want to be responsible. They're okay with us validating things for them on their behalf as a neutral third party. They're okay with us maintaining the blockchain infrastructure for them and validating every transaction and just giving them the outcome of that validation process. So it's a case-by-case basis. We do give the optionality for an organization if they're interested in running a node themselves, but it's the current state of blockchain isn't extraordinarily user-friendly. We do provide node deployment services, and we do make it as easy as possible for these organizations to get onboarded. But at the end of the day, a lot of them don't want the maintenance overhead that would be required to operate their own node. Is that good for question one?
Yep.
Great. And sorry, what was the follow-up?
The follow-up was, for example, if I do have, let's say, one product, let's say the meat production, right? Some things I want to, at the same kind of supply chain, some things I want to expose publicly to my consumers, and some things I want to keep for my own business use. Is there a way to separate between those two?
Definitely. So within, that's kind of the beauty of that permission public hybrid infrastructure. Basically, what we allow participants to do is they can maintain a shard of the overall network information so that they can see just their information and any information shared to them by a third party. So let's say I'm a distributor and I need to know all my interactions with manufacturer A, and then manufacturer A works with supplier A, and they don't want me as the distributor to see any of their interactions. We can permission it so that all the information that's supported by the network is sharded so that only the applicable parties can see that. The same thing works from a consumer perspective. If there's certain information that needs to be validated on the blockchain infrastructure, but should only be kept between businesses, let's say sensitive pricing information or any information that isn't a concern of the consumer, like I'm not too worried about, you know, this particular attribute, but I'm really worried about where the product came from, we can permission and shard that so the consumer only sees the information that we've made publicly accessible.
Yeah, awesome. And then a follow-up on that. So when we're saying about the blockchain technology, I mean, one thing that I can see, it's obviously the benefit is that it is verifiable, it is almost impossible to hack, and therefore it provides this infrastructure of trust that allows a better verification. But what are some other use cases of using the blockchain in this application? What other benefits besides this immutable trust blockchain gives to the supply chain?
Yeah, so I think trust is, for supply chain, obviously a large one. The other is being able to, it sounds overly simplistic, but the amount of use cases that, maybe this is a good time to bring up the platform. The amount of use cases in supply chain where time stamping and proof of knowledge comes in handy is staggering. The amount of times where you need to say, I knew this at this point in time because of X, Y, and Z, whether that's authenticating a document and really being able to establish that the document hasn't been tampered with. You can validate that the document hasn't been forged or changed in any capacity, and you can really timestamp when that existed and get validation from every counterparty concerned with that particular document automatically and succinctly, is extremely crucial and has a lot of different use cases for any sort of B2B or B2C supply chain need. That does boil down ultimately into a little bit of trust, but I think fundamentally timestamping and proof of knowledge is quite a bit different than transparency and supply chain accountability. The other use case that we've seen a lot of, we've dubbed it the Suku marketplace, and we've seen other organizations and other providers do something similar. But basically, this is being able to search and interact and provide opportunities with verified product suppliers that you might not have been able to work with before. And the way this works is, with all this track and trace information, with all this traceability, capturing all this data in an authenticated manner across various interactions and across various supply chains gives us sufficient information to really be able to figure out which vendors and which suppliers are trustworthy and which ones aren't. So this comes down to trust and transparency at the vendor and supplier level, more so than it would really come at the product level. This is more for business interactions and finding somebody new to work with and holding them accountable and meeting SLAs, rather than the end consumer transparency and traceability. And all this boils down to exactly what was asked earlier is, if we're looking at implementation of blockchain for supply chain use cases, what should we be looking for? And that's trust and transparency. And whether that's timestamping whether that's traceability of assets, whether that's authentication of goods, whether that's a marketplace to find suppliers. All those different implementations manifest from the exact same root, which is we need to find a way to find trust and transparency in our current supply chain processes.
Okay, yeah, that all makes sense. I think it's one of the very important things is that's why testimonials work so good with the products, right, on the internet.
Absolutely.
Just because it gives that verification. But
Absolutely.
nevertheless, a lot of those reviews are, sometimes just a little bit adjusted, so there is a little bit of that built as well.
Yep. So
All right.
hopefully we can start to put an end to some of that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have for you, unless
Awesome.
somebody else is willing to chip in. But I think we are done here. All right, Garrett.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the insightful conversations and look forward to talking again soon.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.